get Vote 411 as a soft launch. We have officially said our date was the 13th, which is Monday, but we like to do a soft launch. Most of you or all of you should have gotten an email on Thursday. I think we met Thursday, saying that we did the soft launch and we wanted you guys to help us do some testing. We also sent it to the candidates, and we have already identified a few issues. So we've been working with LWV US, and one of them is LWV St. Louis. They have a Grandview R2 school district, which is in Hillsboro, Missouri, not Grandview. And so they put in the wrong GIS data. And so when they point to that R2, and we've heard from several people that they've got the wrong one. So those are the kinds of things that we want to see when the soft launch, because, you know, we can't find all of those kinds of problems. So get the word out over the weekend. Contact your neighbors, your friends, have them help us out, do testing the soft launch. I put in the chat down there. Go to vote411.org/ballot and put in your address. We also have a link to all of our forums on that page, which we're really pleased that we got that up really early. We put the playlist and not each one of the forums out there so somebody can go and choose which one. And then for those, and then also we want to get see if members want to get that one-page flyer that we have and pass it out to their family and friends, either electronically or in person. I'm assuming Becky's got her flyers to take when they do voter registration. So I think we're all good there. I'm also going to dump in the comment section a link to the LWV YouTube channel. And so if you haven't, and if you also want to share this link with your family and friends about the candidate forums, it takes you to the playlist, which has all the forums in there for the 2023 April election. And I believe that's all that we had today.
Awesome. I know that's a Herculean effort, but it is the single best source on the internet for this voting information. So way to go.
Oh, I will say that I know Pat and I, when she sent out the note to the city clerk saying, hey, let everybody in your towns know that Vote 411 is up and running, we got a really nice comment back from one of the city clerks saying how great this was a resource. So it's nice to hear from those kind of folks as well.
Yeah, well, people all around my office ask for your guide by name, just so you know. It is really recognized. It's really starting to be seen as the ultimate resource. So way to go, team. I know that's just massive. Okay, up next, we have Becky. Tell us about those naturalizations, Sarah.
Hi, everybody. I am Becky Yaki, the chair of the Voter Services voter registration effort for the League. And so I coordinate almost all of the voter registration activity. This next week, as you would see on the volunteer tab of our website, you can volunteer for one of the 3 naturalization, which is the new citizen ceremony, coming up on the 15th. And there are 3 different times. The federal courthouse used to be, the place we had these, and now we have them at Harrah's up north, because I think they're able to accommodate so many more people in one large room. I have been told there will be 150 new citizens at each ceremony. So I need all the volunteers I can get. Typically, these ceremonies are People come in about 25 to 30 minutes later. They have been through the ceremony. They're sworn in. They are new citizens. They have all their ID and their documents with them, which is great for us and for voter registration. And we try to catch them before they jump back in their cars and go back home or wherever it is that they are going after the ceremony. We get people from the Kansas City area. We get people from Chillicothe, sometimes Springfield, sometimes Columbia. So it is a huge gathering of one of the most diverse collections of people you'll ever see in the state of Missouri. It is not all Hispanic people, which some people assume. We have people from all over Europe, all over Asia, all over Africa, and it is an inspiring and wonderful, wonderful thing to witness. The times in the volunteer slots are when that ceremony begins. So if you want to watch it, get there like right at 9 o'clock, right at 11 o'clock, and you will get to see the ceremony. And we can show you how to help people fill out the voter registration form in 2 minutes. So come on down, bring your friends. It's all hands on deck. And I got last minute notice of this just a day and a half ago. So it's kind of a last minute thing for us. We like to plan things out and give people a good opportunity to volunteer and make plans. This isn't one of those times. So if you have any time next Wednesday, we would love to have you join us. Even if it says full on the website, come anyway. Bring your friends. It's really, really fun. And it's really a great event. And so thank you so much, Heather, for giving me the opportunity to promote that.
Awesome. Well, I can't wait to get involved in that. And we were talking before you came on, Becky, about just what a cool moment in people's lives that is to be a part of.
Yes. Yes. It's a milestone for all these new citizens. I think they remember when they become a new citizen, just like you remember the day you got married or your birthday or your partner's birthday. It's just one of those great things. It's an emotional high. For my volunteers, it's like a great shot in the arm.
Oh my gosh.
You know, it's
Becky,
a very happy thing.
Becky, don't you also sort out the registrations and send them to the appropriate election board?
Do you know, I don't have to do that.
We used to do that.
I know. I do have to log them on a separate form, but what I do is I can just take them all to the Kansas City Election Board, which is the closest one for me, and then they will send them out to wherever they need to go. So that's kind of a relief that I don't have to send them all out, especially, I don't know, I hate to say it, but the way the mail has been, at least in my neighborhood sometimes. It's nice to take them to an election board.
Yeah, and I have done the practice test for being a naturalized citizen with one of the students where I volunteer at Literacy KC, and I would be surprised if every already American citizen knows the answers to all of those questions. It's really amazing how much they study, how much they prep. And I was able to see that student get naturalized at a ceremony at Union Station, and then I was able to register her to vote. So yeah, if you haven't been to a naturalization ceremony, it's one of the most moving things you can attend. Really, really worthwhile, and makes you appreciate how the many reasons that people come to our country, you know, why they come and how important it is to them.
Great job to that crew. Thank you so much, Becky, and everyone who endorsed how awesome that experience is. Okay, up next, Donna's going to tell us about a pretty cool event around the 50th anniversary of the Sunshine Law. Donna?
Yes, thank you. It is Monday. We are so excited about the educational program we're going to have on Monday at 6:30 via Zoom. I hope you all go out and register and put it on your Nextdoor account. some people say, what is sunshine? Well, it is really the intent to protect public by shining a light on the hidden information and things that happen at meetings and promote transparency. That's what the Observer Corps is doing. And that is why we take on this annual opportunity to share to a broader audience. We talked to Dave. Nancy Shalver has been key in getting us key people. Dave Helling is going to be our moderator. Steve Blockrock, who you've all heard on NPR, and Max Couch is a attorney that deals with First Amendments. He's going to give us a little broader spread because he works in Kansas and the metro area, but he may have some Kansas experience. So please, please take advantage. It is going to be 6:30 to 8, and it will be fun. They are so excited about saying that you don't realize, but the Sunshine Law really is a key factor in democracy and such. So please join us and share it with friends. If there's any questions, I'm glad to answer.
That's going to be a great program. I mean, I think you're right, Donna. It's like we get used to having something around and having the luxuries that come with that thing. We don't want to take it for granted. So let's definitely reflect on 50 years of the Sunshine Law in that program.
Thank you.
Hey,
And
Donna,
I think there are things on social media that you can share.
Oh, good.
For this specific event, I think you can share things from the league's social media. So you might want to do that to just kind of spread the word.
Yeah, great
Thanks,
call.
Becky. Yes, indeed.
hey, Donna, do we send you our questions or do we ask the questions at the time?
At the time,
Okay,
there'll be a Q&A item on the screen that you can see it, send it, and they will be monitored. Evelyn is going to be monitoring that section and introducing Dave. So yes, please. And there is legislation going on right now in Missouri, as you might guess, that is trying to limit and be able to close more meetings and et cetera. So Senate Bill 174 came out as an action alert. So look at that too from our legislative group.
All right, so I'll let anybody else who has questions drop those in the chat. We'll go ahead and move forward to candidate forums. Anitra, what's the latest on candidate forums?
Well, we have 2 left for the Kansas City Council on the 20th and the 21st. They're both at-large districts. Kansas City residents will be voting for 7 different people, 6 at-large candidates, and then the candidate in their district. If you've missed a forum, you can go to the league's website and watch it online. They've been going very well, and they're very well, you're fortunate to have excellent candidates this time around. And Cheryl Barnes, a member of the Forums Committee, has gotten guest moderators from the media who bring additional information to the forums, and that's very helpful also. We also have 4 school district forums: North Kansas City, Liberty, Hickman Mills, and Raytown. And then if you happen to live in Raytown, we're doing one for the Raytown alderman on the 28th of March. Thank you.
And it's my understanding you guys had to make a lot of updates while the plane is flying. So thank you for all your hard work to make that content available to Kansas City. That's a big deal and a lot of work. Appreciate you. Awesome. Election administration is also hot right now. Greg, tell us all of the things that are going on with that.
Okay, we are in the home stretch right now. So 3 big things to talk about. First of all, for those of you not familiar with it, the election administration study, its goal is to enable our membership, all of you, to come up with positions, and positions lead to advocacy. And these positions, as we are talking about them, all have to do with defending our election workers and defending our voters. And that's what the League of Women Voters is all about. So the three things here are, number one, thank you to all of you who attended the consensus meeting on February the 11th. There was a lot of feedback. There was a lot of great ideas that came out of that meeting that have been recorded. Second thing, number two, is that the second consensus meeting, which is going to be identical in format to the February one. If you went to the February one, you don't need to go to this, but the March one that is coming up is on March 21st at 7 p.m. via Zoom, okay? The third thing, and this is very, very, very important, is there will be a special membership meeting on March the 25th where draft positions will be considered and must be approved by membership. But we need 40 people to get there. And we are trying to get 40 people to commit to going to that meeting, because what we don't want to do is show up at the meeting and have 38 and have to run out and find somebody on the street and bring them in. So please sign up. How do you sign up? You can go to the volunteer page on the League of Women Voters website, and you have to be signed in and look for that March 25 event. The other thing is, if you want to find out about the study, we do have a page. It is, if you go to, I believe it's Our Work, and then League Positions, and all of the information we have in the study is there. And then one last thing, special for the next 30 minutes only, and you can just send me in the chat your commitment to attend, and I will record you as being committed. So that's a last minute. Yes, everybody's a winner here. So let me know, and I will do that work for you. So happy to answer any questions.
Awesome. And could someone drop the link to that in the chat? Because I think the League Positions page is just really robust with a ton of great information. And I think really illustrates the extraordinary impact of the work that your crew is doing.
Okay, here we go. And I'm gonna paste, dropped in, and there it is.
Awesome. Yeah, check that out. So we need 40 attendees. Greg, how many do you have so far? How many do we need?
Yeah, well, we've got probably about, as of this morning, we were up to the big number of 12. So we've got our work cut out for us.
Yikes. Okay, we got to get 28 more people. So let's get busy. Sign yourself up, bring a friend. Let's go. Okay, and then I will round out the league announcements. So I am ending my role as chair of the member meeting committee after April. So next month will be my last meeting as the meeting chair, but then we are passing the torch to the lovely and talented Lisa Albright, who will be taking over beginning in May. Now, of course, we have our League of Women Voters Missouri annual event, and then the League of Women Voters Kansas City, Jackson, Clay, and Platte counties annual meeting in May. So there will not be a typical monthly meeting like this programmed in May, but she'll pick up and run with it from June onward. So everybody, please say hello and congratulate Lisa on this. Next month, we have some very exciting content for you as my final hurrah in this role. I'll still be around, but I'll be handing the torch for this role. So on April 8th, we have some speakers secured to talk to us about Gen Z voters and Gen Z voting habits. Our speakers will be coming from organizations called Energizing Young Voters and Loud Light. So really enjoying having conversations with them about what's important to them and what they want to talk about. I think you all will really, really enjoy what you're going to hear. All right, so mark your calendar. We'll see you there. Yeah,
Can I
please.
interrupt just for a shout out to all the great work that Heather has done in the past year. Thank you so
Oh,
much, Heather.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I'm
Yay.
sure it will be awesome in the coming year as well. Thank you so much. That's so kind of you.
Thank you.
Okay, so now to our featured program. Everybody, please give a very warm welcome to our guest speakers today. We're talking about this important topic of disabilities and voting rights. So we have two speakers today. I'm not sure if Barbara has made it on yet. I know she was coming in hot from another commitment this morning. Do we see Barbara yet?
It's here.
Amazing. Okay, so Barbara Sheinbein is a Missouri voter, of course, but then an active member of our league in Metro St. Louis. She is also on Missouri Council for the Blind, Missouri Voter Protection Accessibility Subcommittee, the Society for American Baseball Research, and the American Society for Testing Materials. So just an incredible repertoire of action and influence from Barbara. So I'm really thankful. And of course, she very kindly joined our itinerary at the last minute when I invited her to speak. But not to mention, aside from all of these great contributions, Barbara has personal experience with this topic. Barbara is a registered Missouri voter and she's blind. So welcome, Barbara.
Thank you for inviting me.
We're so glad to have you. And with Barbara, there is a second guest on the line here, Vincent Heitvold, who is a staff attorney at the Missouri Protection and Advocacy Services in St. Louis. And that's a state designated federally funded agency that advocates for the rights of Missourians with disabilities. So Missouri Protection and Advocacy Services provides information and referral services. And then they're also providing individual and systemic advocacy services to ensure that individuals with disabilities are able to fully participate in the voting process. And he's worked for Missouri Protection and Advocacy Services since December 2015, representing clients on a broad range of disability-related legal issues. He's also co-coordinator of the PAVA grant and helps to direct the agency's efforts to promote the full participation of people with disabilities in the electoral process. So thank you both very much for being here, Vincent. Thanks for joining us on your Saturday morning as well.
Yeah, thank you for having me. So just for accessibility purposes, I am a white 40-year-old man. My pronouns are he, him. And I've got a beard, glasses, and thinning hair. So I always say that I hope that doesn't scare people away. That's not the most flattering description, I don't think. But I also wanted to note that if anybody has any additional questions about the role of my agency, whether or not it relates to voting access or any other disability related issues, please feel free to let me know. And I'll let Barbara say a few words if she wants to start. And she did ask me to do this though, so before anybody thinks I'm being mean, Barbara, you might want to move your camera down like 6 inches or so we could see your face there.
This way.
A little higher.
Is that better?
Oh, I lost you. I don't see you on my screen, but that's not your fault. That's me.
Barbara, I can see your face if you just move it up just there you go, right about right there.
Okay, well, I'll have to, let's see, I was trying to figure out not to hold it. That was,
Oh, yeah.
is that still okay or no?
It's a little low now, but
Low. Let's see.
There.
Is that better?
if you lean back a little bit, it might be okay. There you go.
There we go. Perfect.
All right, thank you. I asked Vincent to give me a clue here because I really can't judge that.
Well, awesome. Barbara, thank you so much for joining us today. And I think there's kind of a funny story here. You two actually know each other already. And once you found out you were on the same bill, you coordinated to share your experience from different perspectives. So Barbara, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you've involved yourself in and why? Tell us about your experience.
Well, I got involved with the League of Women Voters because I was unhappy with the voting experiences. I want to start off by saying that you will hear different disabled people with different perspectives. So I'm giving you mine, okay? But I want you to think about this. Let's say you're going to vote next month, and you walk into the polling place, and you're asked to sit down, fill out and mark your ballot, while two people from the Board of Elections are observing you. Just think about that. I am sure every one of you would be thrilled to let that happen. Joke. I'm sure most of the public would be just as thrilled. Okay, this is called not having a private vote. I've had to deal with that most of my life until more recent years when the accessible voting booths came. And there has been some good and bad experiences. I've had very routine experiences. Before the pandemic, as we kind of define things nowadays, I went to a local polling place. I live in the St. Louis County area. And I kind of knew what to expect and so forth and so on. I get there, I check in, I find out there's no headphones. I can't listen to the ballot because there's no headphones. Someone goofed at the Board of Elections and forgot to send them. Well, I didn't really have a choice, so I had to vote what I would call the traditional way with sighted assistants to mark my ballot. I know it wasn't intentional. Well, but more recently, I went to a different polling location. You may or may not know that in St. Louis County now we can vote anywhere in the county as if you're a county resident. So I went to this place and a little wiser. I always bring headphones with me now. And my friend that was with me said she was going to go alert the election official to make sure they're ready. Come back and find out that one of the printers on the voting booths for the general public had broken down. So they took the printer from the accessible voting booth and transferred it there, which means I couldn't use the voting booth. I wasn't real happy. I was offered other options, and I won't go through what options I was offered, but I wasn't happy with any of them. Fortunately, because of the flexibility on polling locations, my friend and I went to another location, not very far away, and I voted routinely. Is this weird, unusual things? Sadly, it's not. I've been hearing from other blind people across the state, very common, unfortunately. They have things like ongoing broken voting booths. They can't use them. Staff at the polling places don't know how to use or set up the accessible voting booth. And so either you wait a while till they figure it out, or you go without it. Sometimes you're offered things like, well, you know, if you go over to the, what do you call it? The clerk, can't think of the name. Anyway, the clerk office, the headquarters in your county, you can go vote. Well, that's maybe not real awful if you're in a metro area, but what if you're in a small town in Missouri? Think how far you have to travel, the inconvenience, the person driving you. Besides the fact, our sighted people aren't asked to do that kind of thing. Okay, these things happen regularly. Someone just told me something that I didn't think about until most recently. She went to vote in the no excuse balloting, you know, the 2 weeks early. She went in to vote and they said, well, we don't have an accessible voting booth. We don't need to have one except for on election day. And the other thing I'll mention that you may or may not know is federal law requires accessible voting booths for every federal election. State of Missouri does not have a corresponding law. So for this upcoming election next month, there will be, I can guarantee you, blind people across the state of Missouri will not be able to use the accessible voting booth because the Board of Elections isn't required to put one out. So you either vote with some sighted person helping you or not voting. That's what it boils down to. I'm very much strongly feel that I should have a private vote. And, you know, when technology was such that we didn't have this, well, that was one thing. But today we do. And sadly, there's too many cases where it's not. There's a whole nother scenario about excused absentee balloting. Vincent and I was going to get to that a little later. So anyway, that's my experiences. That's why I am very strongly feel about this topic. And I'll let Vincent continue.
So, and just to build on what I just heard, you said blind voters across Missouri. There are almost 154,000 estimated blind individuals in Missouri alone at last count. So that's a lot of potential voters impacted by this. And so Vincent, I'd love to hear a little bit more about your work in this area and what you and your organization do to combat some of the challenges here. And we were just referring to blind voters there. Like there are any number of disabilities that require accommodations to ensure everyone has equal access to the vote. How are we combating that through your work?
Yeah, so I mean, you're absolutely right that when we talk about voters with disabilities, we're not just talking about voters with visual issues. You know, there may be any number of reasons why a voter might want to use an accessible voting machine. But I mean, yeah, most commonly it's because of vision. But you know, that reminds me too of an important point to make too, though, when we brought up some numbers there, is that a lot of people, a lot of voting advocates like to say that voters with disabilities are the biggest block of voters, because, you know, 1 in 4 people have a disability, and that, you know, all of us are going to have a disability at some point in our life, most likely. So I think that's an important thing to remember, is that we're really talking about a very broad population here. But you know, going to your question of what exactly my agency does. And so, you know, our agency is set up in such a way that we receive federal grants to you know, provide specific services or help specific populations. You know, the voting access grant, which we call PAVA, is protection advocacy for voting access. But that is to ensure the full participation of people with disabilities generally in the electoral process. So we have pretty broad discretion to use our funds in just about any way we want, as long as we are furthering that goal of promoting the full participation of people with disabilities. So the only thing that we can't do is litigate under that grant, but our agency and other state PNAs have used other grants to address voting access issues through litigation. We've got a pending case right now where Barbara and I are both named plaintiffs, and I say I, but my agency, Mo PNA, is a named plaintiff, where we are challenging the legality of the restriction on the number of people that an assister can help during an election. So in Missouri, you have a limit on, it's 1. You can help 1 person per election, and there's some exceptions for close family members. But the reason why this lawsuit came about was because in Arkansas, they had a restriction of 6. So a person could help up to 6 people during an election. Missouri, you can only help 1. So when that Arkansas law was found to be in violation of the Voting Rights Act, you know, that clued us in here in Missouri to say, hey, it's most likely that our law is too. So, you know, I wanted to mention that we do some litigation under separate grants, but, you know, it's still voting access work. But as far as the PAVA grant goes, we're really focused mostly on outreach and education, and then some targeted advocacy for specific issues that don't necessarily involve litigation. Like we can provide technical assistance for organizations or individuals, and it could be at any point in the electoral process. It doesn't just have to be in-person voting on election day. It could be, you know, as early as the registration process. We get a lot of questions about, hey, what do? I have a guardian. I don't know if I can vote. So we can help assist with, advocacy in that respect. We have applied for the restoration of individual rights, including the right to vote, for some clients in the past. Like I said, those will fall under separate grants, but that is an important thing that we have done for voters with disabilities. But then, anytime that we see like a policy change that's going to negatively impact, the access to the ballot for voters with disabilities, then we'll generally partner with other organizations to engage in, non-legal or administrative, up to legal advocacy. So just for example, when Kansas City had mentioned, I think it was maybe in 2020, that they weren't going to allow curbside voting for some of the vote centers. I think it was during COVID, but we'd partnered with the Missouri Voter Protection Coalition and sent a demand letter to the election authority, and it worked. And they offered curbside voting for all of their polling places. So that was a successful effort. We haven't done anything like that this year. However, I do owe League of Women Voters in the St. Louis area a similar similar systemic issue letter regarding curbside voting procedures across the state of Missouri. That's been a hot topic for us, that there aren't really uniform procedures promulgated by the Secretary of State, and accessibility is just all over the place in terms of curbside voting. So I know that we'll probably get into that more specifically in a little bit, but hopefully that at least gives you a broad overview of the services that we can provide under the PAVA grant.
It's interesting you mentioned curbside voting, because while working the elections in Kansas City this year, one of our members actually ran into and had to report an issue with curbside voting. So we've actually got firsthand experience with some bumps in that road. So we talked about some of your personal experience, firsthand experiencing some challenges at the polls repeatedly, Barbara. So Barbara and Vincent, what are some other common obstacles that individuals with disabilities might face when they're attempting to participate in any part of the electoral process? And what kinds of steps should we be aware of as a league that should be taken to address them?
You want me to go first, or Vincent?
Either
Barbara,
or.
you can go ahead and go first.
So I'll give it to you.
I think there are several. It's like most issues, there are multiple things happening. I think because of the nature of being disabled, people are becoming disabled. They might not have been disabled 2 years ago, or their disability has changed, or whatever. And I think one of the things that comes out is the disability community in general doesn't necessarily know what voting options they even have. I can tell you this has happened to me, and a friend of mine who's blind has had this happen to him. We walked into a voting location, and without any prompting, we're kind of directed to go to the voting spot and have sighted people help us mark our ballot. In other words, we're not even asked about the accessible voting booth. I have to bring it up. So, if I didn't know it was there, I wouldn't have brought it up. I wouldn't have been able to use it. So there is definitely an issue with that. There's also, because of all the issues that have been happening, quite frankly, a lot of people in the disabled community don't feel welcome to vote. Really don't. I mean, if you have to go through a hassle to vote, then it's not worth it necessarily. Obviously, transportation is an issue for many disabled folks to get to the polling places. And of course, we've already touched upon the training and equipment issues. And then, of course, we have some bigger issues that have to be resolved out of Jeff City, and we'll probably touch on those in a little bit. But those are the things that really jump out that and some of this folds right in with the mission of the league. I mean, we educate the voters. So let's do a better job of educating all the voters.
Right. And so that does go back to the kind of outreach and education that I was talking about that my agency does. I should have specified that that was outreach and education, not only for voters, but for election authorities. So we do often partner with election authorities to address common barriers for voters with disabilities. I would typically break it down into a few broad categories. I would say the accessibility of processes leading up to election day is going to be a big barrier because um, how do you register to vote in Missouri? Well, I mean, in the past, you've typically filled out a voter registration card and then mailed that to the Secretary of State. That is not the best or most accessible process. Now, there are ways for doing it online now, but again, I don't know how accessible those formats are. So I would say, there are some technology barriers at this point. And this will come up later in the conversation, but I always say that I'd like to see Missouri enter the 21st century in terms of voting technology. And the registration process is one example of where we're behind some other states that have innovated and come up with accessible ways for voters to register. So leading up to the actual election day barriers, the other broad categories are going to be the physical accessibility of polling places. St. Louis City is having problems with that right now. There are just so many old buildings that are used as polling places that are just inaccessible for people with disabilities or people with mobility issues. Then there's also, specific curbside voting procedures. A lot of counties are going to say, for example, well, if somebody needs a curbside ballot, they need to get somebody inside to tell us that, we need to send out a team of judges and get them a ballot. Well, why is it that a voter with a disability that needs to access a curbside ballot, why is it that they have to rely on a stranger to come in and assist them with, the notifying the election judges? So, that's a problem when we're talking about, an equal opportunity for, every voter, regardless of their level of ability to vote, an equal opportunity to vote secretly and independently, which Barbara already touched on. But then we're also talking about, again, the unavailability of machines on election day. And Barbara mentioned, well, a lot of election authorities are going to tell you that, well, we're not required to do that for our municipal elections. We're only required to put out the machines for federal elections. And my response to that is are you forgetting about the ADA? The Americans with Disabilities Act that requires that you don't discriminate against people with disabilities when you're providing government services such as voting. So I don't necessarily agree with the conclusion that accessible machines are not required for all elections. Now I know that there's going to be a lot of complaints from smaller election authorities that talk about that, not having the resources to lease or program the machines, but I don't necessarily know that that's, an undue burden. But moving on from that, the last thing I wanted to mention with just common barriers that, I've noticed from interacting with my clients and also from volunteering with the Election Protection Hotline, which if you're not aware, we should probably mention that is a good resource. But the one of the other last issues I want to touch on is just the nature of communication with or between poll workers or election judges and voters with disabilities. There's too much, I think, assuming that goes on, or sometimes I like to call it gatekeeping, where a person with a disability might enter a polling place and then assumptions are immediately made about their level of ability or what kind of method they should be using to vote. And I think that leads or it justifies a lot of these conclusions that are getting made about well, what's the good enough solution for this voter, right? Why can't this voter just do this? Why do they have to vote this way? And really, it's not up to the poll worker to make that determination, or to gatekeep, as I call it. There have been times where I've gone into the polling place and I've asked, hey, is your electronic machine set up? And the response I get from the poll workers is, yeah, but that's only for people with disabilities. And it's like, well, how do they know that I'm not a person with a disability? Because you have so many people with disabilities that aren't outwardly apparent. So, You know, I mean, I could have a learning disability or I could have an intellectual disability and they might not know that. And that might be a reason that I want to use an audio ballot or have assistance from, you know, a trusted supporter. You know, in terms of communication, I think that there's a long way for poll workers to go, and there's a long way for all of us to go. I'm still learning, you know, in terms of disability etiquette, you know, how to interact and how to not talk down to some of my clients. So I mean, it's a learning process, and I don't expect it to you know to the problem to be solved overnight, but it's something I think that's worth mentioning to all the election authorities, that, you know, to be respectful and not make assumptions, and then, you know, use your disability etiquette and your people first language. That's one thing we push with election authorities a lot. And interestingly enough, I did want to maybe address this with Barbara real quick. I was doing a presentation at St. Louis City for their Board of Elections. And, you know, I was talking about people first language and putting the person first in your language. And you say a person with a disability rather than a handicapped person or a disabled person, you know, a person with mental illness, you know, whatever the case may be. And I got a response that was, well, did you know that not all people with disabilities like people first language? And I said, well, you know, wouldn't you say that more often than not, that that's the preferred convention? And she didn't seem to agree with that. But so I noticed, Barbara, that you don't often say person with a disability, you will say disabled. So I mean, I guess the question I have is, I mean, people with disabilities aren't a monolithic, you know, population, right? There's variation. So what is your preference in terms of interacting with people and how you prefer to be addressed?
I really don't have on a personal level, I don't have a preference. But your point is very valid. And I touched on it earlier. All blind people are not alike. All folks in a wheelchair are not alike. For a variety of reasons, because we're people. We're also people. We're not, our disability is not our only feature. And so for me personally, no, I don't really care. So you're not going to offend me. No one's gonna. That's not in my radar.
Interesting. Yeah, a lot of different. I think what you said about not being a monolith is very interesting and has come up in a lot of our previous conversations on other topics too, about how even within this specific issue or the specific population, there are 100 different perspectives on this particular topic. So I want to go back to something that you all actually were just talking about with the accessible voting booths and machines. We've got a couple questions from the audience here. So I'll start with Kelly's. Kelly asks, what exactly is an accessible voting machine or accessible voting option? Like, what does it do? How does it work?
I can take that. It essentially has, I guess, 3 different types of disabled people. I'm talking in broad strokes. Okay. The vast majority are going to be those with vision loss. For me personally, what once the election official does a little setup, make sure my right ballot's going to pop up in there. It talks to me. It talks to I have a human sounding voice, and I have knobs that I can easily feel, and I turn the knob to make or press a button. There's a little bit of both, and not all just to add to more fun. Not all the machines are exactly designed the same either, but the process is. So anyway, so then I rotate the knobs to whatever my choices are, and go through just listen to the ballot, and it gives all the information. And then when I'm done here, at least in St. Louis County, I'm not sure how common it is. Tells me print, I hit it, print, and it prints it out, and then I go get it scanned. It also has a feature where it doesn't talk, and this is all set up at the start of your balloting process. For people who have limited vision, they would probably want to use large print, for example. So there's all kinds of ways to set that up to make the print the best it can be for that person, because again, the vision can vary quite a bit. It also can be obviously those with different things like learning disabilities, like Vincent mentioned earlier. So you can set that up however you want. You can use both if you want to. So it's a matter of making the choices. The next group that can use it is someone who has disability with their hands and perhaps can't mark a ballot in the traditional way, that individual can use this booth because the knobs and buttons are very easy and more likely to be able to be used those than maybe if your hands just don't have the dexterity and strength to use it. So that's in a nutshell. Vincent, if I forgot something, you just let me know.
No, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. I would say though, the trend now is more to the ballot marking systems where, you know, a person can use the machine to mark a ballot, and then that ballot can be fed into a scanner. Yeah, as far as I know, I mean, if anybody remembers the old accessible machines where there was like a ticker tape on the side, and whenever you would input one of the selections, it would be recorded on a like a receipt tape. Those are not really used at all anymore. I think St. Louis City still had them, but is phasing them out. But yeah, I think that the ballot marking devices are the trend now, as far as I know.
Fascinating. And then Anne asked, has there been any legislation introduced in the Missouri legislature to address the lack of accessible voting booths in Missouri and local elections?
Yeah, Barbara, I'm sure you know about this one too, but I mean, yeah, I think there's been election that has discouraged the use of accessible voting machines, just because of the largely, you know, manufactured concerns about election security. I mean, and I know where my organization is nonpartisan, and I know that your group is also nonpartisan, but you know, I've heard stories about subcommittee meetings at the Capitol, about election issues that have gone completely off the rails. And you know, so I think there's really a push from most of our legislators to you know, make all ballots paper ballots, manually marked ballots. And you know, that's not necessarily the most accessible thing. So I don't think that there's been any legislation that has made things more accessible. But that's not to say that things haven't been introduced or won't be introduced in the future.
There's been a little bit in the middle of some other maybe not so great bills where they've, you know, mentioned to continue to use the accessible voting machine. This all goes back though, when you think about the paper, I can speculate that those that are very strong advocates of the paper will say, well, she can go ahead and vote, just have someone help her in the voting booth and have them help her mark her ballot, and all is well. I think sadly, that is a very common, not just by legislature, but the member of the public. I've had people actually tell me things like, what is the issue, Barbara? You were able to vote. You know, I guess I'm just a different level of citizen, and by some people's view, I'm not entitled to a private vote, which drives me
Right.
nuts.
Yeah, and Barbara, we talked about that on the phone the other day, where, you know, I mean, we're talking about equal opportunities here. We're not talking about creating a second class of voter. You know, if I can go into a polling place and grab a ballot and sit down and mark it without any assistance, then why can't anybody else, regardless of their level of ability? So, I mean, that's really the necessity of the electronic voting machines and the accessible voting machines, again, for every election, because we're talking about, you know, discrimination and failure to provide accommodations, and, you know, not providing equal access to government services. So, you know, again, I just not to harp on it, but I just don't buy that logic that election authorities aren't required to provide that for every election.
And they don't. They absolutely do not. It's definitely happening.
Wow. Wow. Becky, I saw your hand up. Did you want to ask a question before we move on to more from the pool here?
Yes, thank you. I also wondered if it is more difficult to register to vote because of the new photo ID law for the disabled community. Because of course now you can't use the old forms of ID that were available to everybody to register to vote. So I wonder if this has a particular onus for the disabled community.
I think that varies quite a bit. For example, I've been registered so long yet.
Yeah.
But
Mhm.
anyway, I think it can. I think that one of the groups that might hit the hardest is maybe senior citizens who don't drive anymore.
Right.
And then maybe they don't get out as well, and then they're not necessarily computer literate. I think that's the group that I think might have the biggest difficulty. Other than that, it really does vary quite a bit.
Okay.
Yeah, I wanted to mention that as far as the photo ID law is concerned, now I did want to clarify though, are we talking about voting in person with the photo ID, or were we talking about the registration process, or both?
Well, I guess I'd like to hear about both, because of course you can register without any ID, but then when you go to the polls, you have to have that state issued or US issued photo ID in order to confirm your registration and vote a regular ballot like everyone else. Yes, the provisional ballot is available, but I don't know. I think a lot of us consider that kind of second class voting.
Well, yeah. I mean, the provisional ballot is useless because I think that the statistic is that only like at most 1 in 4 provisional ballots are ever counted. So, I mean, you want to avoid voting with the provisional ballot at all costs. But you did mention though, registering to vote without a photo ID, and then maybe having to present the photo ID at in-person voting. But I know that it doesn't come up. It doesn't come up as much as it could for voters with disabilities, because so many of them vote absentee by mail just on the basis of their disability. There's what's called the permanently disabled voting list,
Right.
which again, they should probably update the name of it. But there are so many voters who have submitted an application to be placed on the permanent list, which will then get them in an application for an absentee ballot for every election from their election authority. So there's a lot of voters who rely on that, so they don't necessarily encounter that issue of, oh, I'm voting in person, I need to bring an ID, I don't have an ID, because they're already registered and they already vote absentee. But I have also seen situations in which election authorities have requested copies of IDs for people who have not previously submitted them. So I mean, I don't know how often that comes up, because again, there's 116 election authorities and everybody does something these things a little bit differently. But the one comment I wanted to make about just obtaining an ID, just for whatever reason, whether it's for voting or for your subsidized housing or whatever,
Right.
that we have so many people with disabilities that are confined to their homes. So what does a person who's confined to their home do in Missouri when they need to get a photo ID? I'll tell you what, I'm looking into a case that involves exactly that right now. And what can they do? Not a whole lot.
Yeah.
I think we've even gotten an answer from the Department of Revenue that has said, well, you know what, it doesn't matter if they have to arrive in an ambulance, they have to be at a license office to get their ID, which to me is outrageous. And if there are other states that can provide remote options for obtaining an ID, I don't know why we can't. Again, that seems to me to be an ADA issue. But I did just want to throw that out there, that when we say like, oh well, it's harder for people with disabilities to get IDs, like, well, sometimes it's impossible unless they're able to incur the cost of a $20,000 ambulance ride because it's not an emergency. So that's the kind of stuff we're looking at here.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, great questions. So going back into our programmed questions here, I would love to know about some of the situations where you have successfully advocated for individuals with disabilities or populations with specific types of disabilities to ensure that they were able to exercise their right to vote. Any successes that you want to highlight?
I think Vincent's probably in a better position to handle that.
Sure. Yeah, so I mean, like I mentioned, we have seen some success with just, like I said, non-legal advocacy, demand letters essentially sent to election authorities. We've seen success kind of in improving the culture surrounding voting and providing a service for voters with disabilities. And then the education of voters with disabilities, just letting people know what their rights are, and letting them know how to be polite but assertive in securing those rights from election authorities. I mean, we've seen a lot of success in those aspects now. And like I said, we've gotten voting rights restored for individuals, and we've been with individuals on election day to ensure that they're capable of or able to cast their ballot, or not prevented from casting their ballot by the lack of the appropriate technology, or curbside voting, or whatever the case may be. Election protection, which is something I mentioned earlier, is generally something that MoPNA will participate in. That's 866 our vote. I want to make sure I mentioned that for anybody that's not familiar with it. And just so you understand how it works, leading up to election day or on election day, if anybody calls in that number with a disability access issue, it will generally be brought to my attention or another attorney in my office. We're kind of the go-tos when it comes to accessibility issues. And then, generally that'll result in a follow-up call to the voter, and most often a call to the relevant election authority to correct whatever the accessibility issue is. So I mean, that could involve anything from, hey, I'm sitting here in the curbside spot and no one's coming to bring me a ballot, or there aren't signs telling me where to go. The only entrance I see is not accessible, or hey, the accessible entrance is locked. I mean, so any of those like little things that can go wrong on election day are things that we always, not always, but more often than not, are going to see success in resolving, just based upon having a rapport with the election authorities whenever possible, and engaging in, just like I said, targeted advocacy. So I mean, hopefully that answers that question. I mean, I can't say like there's like, groundbreaking litigation that we've won in the last couple of years, but I mean, who knows? There's always an opportunity given the right situations and the right plaintiffs.
Yeah, so every single day, all the small things adding up is really what's moving mountains here. So thinking of going back to your comment on resources, so we've talked about a voter hotline, but are there other resources available to people with different disabilities who are seeking to navigate that electoral process? And how do they get access to these resources? Where do they start?
Well, it kind of depends again on the individual and their disability. For those that may not be aware, my computer does talk. There are some things that don't work with my speech software, but for example, I can use Vote 411. Three cheers for that, right? I also can get a copy of my ballot through St. Louis County. I can look up different information that way. And so anybody that has adequate computer skills should be okay. What you find does vary. I mean, we're not talking Vote 411 when I say this, but I'm just saying, if you were to go to, and I did look up Kansas City just for the fun of it, its website's pretty good giving information. Not necessarily other places when it comes to that. So there is some communication among different organizations that work with different types of disabilities, but I can tell you there is not like a centralized depository for all disabled people that are all connected to it. It doesn't work that way. We're very decentralized. whatever the disability is. We're all very decentralized. So there's a lot of places information doesn't reach. So it's really up to the individual to hunt these things out. Whatever online is probably the biggest thing today.
Yeah, and I think one thing to remember is don't forget about the information that you can obtain from either the Secretary of State's website or from your local election authority, either through their website or by calling them. I think a lot of questions that we get up around election day are going to be, I don't know about my registration status. I don't know where to vote. I don't even know what jurisdiction I'm registered to vote in. I mean, that's relevant for St. Louis City and Kansas City, I think, maybe to a smaller degree, but so don't forget about those resources, and make the election authorities provide the assistance for you or your friends or family that they need to be, like if you have questions about voting procedures, call up the election authority, and if you need to know what election authority you need to call, then look up your information on the Secretary of State's website. There have been so many self-advocates that I've talked to who have had issues resolved by contacting the election authority before election day, a month or two in advance, to say, hey, in the past, I've encountered this problem. Can we fix it? And, I think that election authorities appreciate that. So again, if you or, someone has a specific accommodation issue, then I would say you could do some advocacy just with the election authority, just on that local level. But aside from that, if you need some additional assistance, then in addition to 866 our vote, if again you want advocacy support, you're more than welcome to call my agency, and I'll put my number in the chat here when I get done talking, and I'll put my email. And there's also a PAVA email account that's rarely used, but we do check it. But yeah, I mean, feel free to reach out to me. If you have a specific accessibility issue, and it could be, again, this could be an individual issue. This could be something that you want to tackle as, part of a group effort, partnering with my agency. I mean, there have been plenty of self-advocacy groups that we've worked with in the past who have, we've done joint letters that have seen some pretty positive outcomes. So I just wanted to make note of that as well. I think I did see one question about guardianship and voting. So Heather, did you want me to take that now, or did you want to?
I think it looks like Barbara might have a build on what you just said, and then we'll cut over
Oh,
that.
sure. Sorry, Barbara.
Yeah, I just, Vincent, I don't know, have you shared that flyer that I developed for disabled voters yet, or
Yeah.
is that?
If you guys don't mind, I can do a share screen real quick.
Yeah, by all means.
This is something I recently was mostly wrote myself for the St. Louis area, but certainly with a minimal modifications. What I think the league could really do, anytime you have voter contact, whether it's sending out information, public speaking, remember when you're talking to someone, and maybe there's not one disabled person in that group, but maybe their grandma is, or their neighbor is. So you really don't know who you're going to reach. So where I sit, I'd say, talk about it every contact you have about disabled voting, because you just don't know who you might be reaching.
Vincent, I think Anne is working on getting you screen share privileges so you can pull that flyer up. But yeah, Barbara, that's a great point. And it's really interesting. When I said, hey, everybody, even if you can't make it to this event, tell someone you know who might appreciate it. 100% of people knew somebody who would appreciate this content. So that's awesome. And a great point for us to keep in mind. Vincent, are you having any luck getting those screen share privileges yet?
Should be good to.
I do have.
Screen.
Awesome.
Make sure I get the right one. I think, can you guys see attention disabled voters?
Sure can.
Yeah, so this is, yeah, I think, Barbara, did you say that you had done all of this?
I had a little help tweaking it so it would look right because I figured I needed that help, but, and if
I'm
you go.
moving fast. Sorry.
Yeah. And-
Yeah, but tell us about it.
Yeah, Barbara, talk to us about what kind of information is in here. I think this was included in the email that went out last night or earlier this morning. Is that correct?
Basically, what this is designed to do, it's designed for the voter. It goes back to disabled folks not necessarily knowing what their options are, and to make sure that the voter understands it's the voter's choice to figure out which way they want to submit their ballot and mark their ballot. And so this is just an overview and some tips. And in the St. Louis area, for example, we have a nonprofit that offers rides. So that's really a big issue, of course. And some tips to make it a more smooth, I guess, a less bumpy experience. You know, preparing your ballot in advance so you know when you get there what you're dealing with and you don't struggle, you know, just marking your ballot. So that it's just hopefully just to educate the voters.
Yeah, great resource. And then how do you distribute this so they get access to this content?
We've just started using it, and we've been, I've literally in the last 2 weeks, so it hasn't happened, so it hasn't gone out much so far. I've been sending it to some senior centers.
Okay.
That's what I've been doing it recently.
Great idea. Yeah, I think a lot of people are really excited about this idea in the chat right now. So trying to think about how we might be able to bring something like this to life locally, and let us know how that goes. And if you see anything that ends up working particularly well.
Sure thing.
And so I did want to mention that we brought up transportation a couple times, and I had forgot to mention that at least in the St. Louis area, I think the A. Philip Randolph Institute is who to contact if you know somebody that needs a ride. I'm pretty sure that that the whole person in Kansas City has offered some assistance in that respect in the past, but I mean, I'm not 100% sure. I know that they are a polling place. But I think that they have provided some advocacy in the past or some additional support for people that need help getting to polling places.
Does anybody on the call know? I know we have a few folks who are connected to the whole person. Becky?
Yes, in fact, last year I was at a whole person celebration event for the ADA, and we registered voters, and I had a lot of great conversations with people within the community about differences, because for instance, in the deaf community, it's not a direct translation of sign language into printed matter on a page, and that is kind of an issue for them. I do know that the A. Philip Randolph Institute here in town, I don't know how extensive their reach is, but they do provide rides to the polls. And there are some churches that will provide that service. If you kind of happen to be in that church community, you would find out about it. So yes, and there's I put it in the chat, there is a whole pamphlet about accessible voting on the election or the local election board website, the Kansas City Election Board, which I think goes to Vincent's point about how the bigger metro areas are more used to needing to provide services or more sensitive to these needs. I honestly don't know what our other counties in the area do. I don't know what Platte County does, for example, or Clay County, or Jackson County, which is different from Kansas City, or Cass County. I don't really know what they do, but that might be a good project for someone to undertake. So I'm taking notes about it. So, and thank you.
And Donna, did you have a build on that?
Well, Freedom Inc. does transportation for their service area where they have things. And several league members, I mean, I think Ann can say we got a call or two, and we had a league member that actually did it. And we tried in the past to offer that service, but didn't get the response.
Yeah, there's a real, I think there's a lack of that in our community, and Freedom Inc. does offer rides, but they also endorse a slate of candidates. And so that can be, problematic for us to refer people to Freedom Inc. And so, yeah, that's an issue that we may have a member who is looking to organize that for 2024, but we might not have the capacity to do that for the elections between now and the general election in 2024. And so, yeah, it's an issue.
Yeah. So we are coming up toward the end of the program. I want to leave Barbara and Vincent with one last question, if we could. This is a group full of very proactive people who love to get involved and help however we can. So we would love your advice on any steps that we can take as league members and advocates, people who register voters, people who work polls. What are some steps that we can take to proactively make the electoral process and polling places more accessible and accommodating for people with disabilities of all kinds?
I would say a lot of that's been covered. I think the league has a unique position when it comes to education, and I think they can work if it's very neatly with the education of both the election officials at the individual precinct level. We're not talking just the county clerk. We're talking that get down to the precinct level, and also the communication needs to be improved, and education with the disabled community, because quite frankly, many of us have given up. We don't feel welcome. I do want to touch on one other thing that I'm going to be quick, I promise, but it's a real big pet peeve, and Vincent knows probably what I'm going to talk about, and that is excused absentee voting if you're blind. Most of you know how that process works. I'm not going to review it, but it's nothing but a piece of paper to me. I can't independently do any of that process myself, whether it's the application, previewing the ballot, reading the ballot, filling out the envelope. There is nothing accessible about this at all. And the state of Missouri already has an answer and refused to let us use it. If you're familiar with how citizens abroad or the military can vote electronically, we can use that system, but the state of Missouri will not even discuss it with us. There's been a complaint filed with the Department of Justice. This is at the federal level on voting issues here in Missouri, and it includes this issue among all the other issues that have been brought up about lack of training on election officials and broken machines, curbside voting issues. All this is all part of this DOJ complaint. We're still waiting on it. Who knows what will happen with that. But I just want to let you know that when it comes to the visually impaired folks, we are very unhappy with the lack or non-existent accessibility on the excused absentee voting system. And I'll turn it over to Vincent.
Thank you, Barbara. That was incredibly important. So I just want to reiterate that point, that is something that we should be paying attention to, leaning into, talking to our representatives about. Okay, thank you, Barbara. Vincent?
Yeah, and I mean, it goes back to what I was saying earlier about how can we get Missouri into the 21st century in terms of voting technology, and that's a perfect example. I think that there's a pretty famous case out of Maryland. I think it's called Lamone, or it's commonly referred to as Lamone, even though there's a couple of Lamone cases, because I think was the Secretary of State or something from that state. But that case basically said that there had to be equal opportunities for voters to register. And so that involved online registration, if I'm not mistaken. So again, I think that things are going to trend that way in terms of just the way that the federal case law is heading, that the absentee voting is going to need to be 100% accessible sometime hopefully in the near future. But yeah, I mean, if we're talking about ways to affect that kind of systemic change, it's just you've got to remember to never stop being an advocate, and to always be addressing these issues and always being, like I say, polite but assertive with your election authorities, or with the Secretary of State for that matter. So but I don't want you guys to forget that for people who feel like Barbara said, that they've just given up. There are still opportunities to submit complaints through either the Help America Vote Act process. There are HAVA complaints, is what we call them, that are submitted directly to the Secretary of State whenever there's an accessibility issue. And there's also as Barbara mentioned, the Department of Justice, who is very interested in accessibility issues in Missouri right now. I don't know if any of you remember, but there was a story about the Cole County, which is Jefferson City, the Cole County Election Authority, barring the Department of Justice investigators from the polling places on the November election. So the DOJ is actively investigating, and I'm sure that they would love to hear people's stories, if they're continuing to experience problems on election day. So having said all that, don't forget that there are avenues for affecting change. And anytime that anybody, like I said, whether it's an individual or a group, wants to partner with my agency to focus on a specific issue, please feel free to reach out to me. I put my information in the chat there. And also, if you want any questions about guardianship and voting answered that we maybe didn't have time to get to today, please feel free to reach out to me. And I'll do what I can.
I do want to also mention, as a league member, if any of you feel that anything I can do to help on this, I don't have to help just in St. Louis metro area. I don't pretend to be a quote expert or have all the answers. That's why Vincent and I are happy to work together. He's got his part, I've got my part, but I'd be very willing to help any of you guys in the western part of the state.
Amazing. Well, it's definitely a team effort, and we've got a lot of work ahead of us, but I think we will keep chipping away. I'm so thankful for your time, especially on a Saturday morning, that you all were willing to come spend this time with us and educate us and empower us to go out there and do good work alongside you all. I hope this won't be our last conversation. Let's definitely stay in touch and keep things moving. Everybody, please give a huge round of applause and much gratitude to Barbara and Vincent for joining us today. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys. Thanks for your attention. I really appreciate it. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, thank you again for inviting me, and it was my pleasure to talk with all of you today.
Appreciate you. All right, hope to have you back sometime soon. So league folks, we're gonna round out the end here with a social media minute with Judy, and we'll close with our 5 ways to engage this month.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Heather. And again, we're going to miss you. And we thank you for everything you've done and wish you well. And you're still, among us and coming back as a member. So that's always good. And that's great. And let me see. Let me just pull this up here. One sec. So, and yeah, hang on. So sorry. One second. Yeah. And then also, before I get started, want to welcome Lisa too.
Oh, yes.
To her new position.
Oh, Lisa made it. Yes, Lisa, we I don't think you were on yet, but we congratulated you on your forthcoming role on the member meetings chair role.
Thank you very much. I did hear it and I heard the whole program. It was amazing.
Oh,
and
good.
I have the hard act to follow, Heather.
Oh, still a team.
Yeah. And also thanks for this great presentation. This was fantastic today. Lots of good learnings and lots of good thoughts for action items ahead. Turning to the social media, what we'd like just, in the next few minutes, couple of minutes, is basically go to our social media accounts, which I will post, and you see posted here, but I'll post the links in the chat so that you can click on them and go directly to them. Follow an account that you're not following already. Have to pull over here. Got him. I've got him, Heather. Yeah, thanks. I just pulling my screen around. And then yeah, if you could follow there, you'll see the Sunshine Law there. There are other posts there, the forums, other events coming up, and inspirational quotes, all kinds of things. So if you are on Twitter, if you are on Facebook, if you're on LinkedIn, if you're on TikTok, and I'm gonna also follow up with the request to go to our YouTube channel and subscribe. Please subscribe, and then you'll hopefully get notifications when we post something like all these really great forum videos and this great meeting as well. This is where you can find it. So to rewatch, to share it on any of these lovely social media channels. So thank you so much for all the following and sharing you've already done. But again, this is just, a good minute or two to take that time to go on your computer or take your phone, follow any of these accounts that you're not following, or go on the accounts you are following, and please hit that like button, hit that share button, let your friends know that this is a great post they should know about. So that is about it. Thank you so much.
And just so you know, folks, when you are engaging and liking and sharing that content on social media, you are doing your part to help those social media algorithms see our content as more relevant and show it to more people who may not have seen that content before. So we kind of get out of our little echo chamber when we do that. So thank you for liking, sharing, subscribing, all the things. It really does have a tangible downstream impact. And last item for the day.
Heather?
Yes.
I'm so sorry. I have one more little announcement. We do have new members on the call today. And if anyone is interested in joining the social media committee, please let me know. We'd love to have you.
Great call. Great call. Smart thinking there, Judy. All right. So if you are looking for ways to engage this month, besides engaging with that social media, the things that I heard in this meeting today, we want to help test out the soft launch of vote411.org/ballot this weekend. Make sure you send any corrections, issues, inconsistencies to vote411@lwvkc.org. Every little bit helps to make sure that this is a great experience when it launches. Share that Vote 411 is here with your family, friends, coworkers, and social media. Let's spread it far and wide and empower people to vote well. And then the two big events for the election administration study, the consensus that we need 40 people to attend on March 21st, and the information session on March 25th. All the information for those events is available on the lwvkc.org calendar. And finally, just a reminder, our fundraising committee is still in search of someone to lead that committee. Co-chairs are totally welcome. The one thing we know is it cannot be Rita, because Rita is the treasurer, and that is not cool to have those two be the same role. So we really need someone to lead that committee and manage and steer that fundraising effort. So please reach out to Rita. Do they reach out to you if they are interested in potentially being considered for that position? Okay, Rita says yes, and your hand is up. Did you want to ask or say something on top of that?
Yeah, I also wanted to mention that this is not a difficult position. everything is organized for it. I'm happy to show and let anyone know everything that needs to be done and be on call for the entire time. So you won't be thrown into this without assistance.
Yes, great point. Great point. I think sometimes people think fundraising can be really intimidating. I think you'll all be very surprised that this is not as intimidating as you think, and it's a very impactful role. Anne, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I just want to make sure we're clear that the election administration study, the 21st is where we will do some discussion, and that's the more of the information session. And then the 25th is when we will actually vote. So I think we got those a little bit mixed up. So the 25th is when we need a quorum.
Got it. Okay, I'm going to switch that right now and put it up so everybody can screenshot the right information. Okay, it's fixed allegedly.
Thank you.
All right, 21st information session, 25th consensus session. I did have them switch there.
To be precise,
Please.
the 21st is a consensus meeting, and then the 25th is where we vote on positions. And the 25th is the one where we need the quorum.
Need 40 people. All right, we're doing it again. We're going to get this right. There we go. So this is the correct information now.
And not only that, the 40 people can either be Zoom or presential. So you can be there either in body or in ether.
And you said for those who decide to come in the physical form, as opposed to the spiritual form, we can go to the Westport.
That's exactly right. It is the Westport Library.
Westport Library at 10:30 a.m. that day.
That's right. 10:30 is when the business session will begin. 10 o'clock is when the library doors will open, and consistent with all League of Women Voters meetings, there's a 30-minute session period of time, social time, between the time the doors open and the time we start the meeting, and the same thing on Zoom.
Wonderful. All right, crew. Well, we're a few minutes past time, so we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Thank you all so much for making time on your Saturday morning to join us. We'll see you next month for Gen Z voters on April. Have a great month.
Thank you, Heather.
Thanks.